and feel free to keep me honest if I say anything wrong. I need to remember that next time I have to enable closed captions and things like that on this. So apologize for that. I'll try to speak clearly so everyone can understand. So like I said, there's a short little, maybe a half-hour little presentation I'm going to do here on Intro to Progressive Web Apps, or PWAs as they're abbreviated. Then we'll go into plenty of time for discussion, questions, things like that. So again, feel free to just chat them as you have them, and we'll discuss. So did I introduce myself? I probably haven't introduced myself. So I'm Sean Walsh. I run a small consultancy called Crowd Communications Group with my wife, Jessica, and we primarily work with open source content management systems, Drupal, WordPress, and Jamstack stuff to build web applications, primarily for higher education and nonprofit clients. So that's my experience coming into this. So quick agenda of this brief talk. So I want to define what a PWA is capable of doing, so you can understand what a PWA is and why you might want to use it. Discuss when it's a good option. I have a rough demo that I try to spin up during the day today, and then questions and discussions. The demo will probably fall on its face, just to be perfectly honest, but at least it'll show you the guts of walking through one of these example module kind of things. I built it for myself versus doing it wrote from any example. So we'll go from there. Again, probably the best way you can learn anything well is by building something with it and trying to explain it to others. So enjoy the ride. So what is a PWA? So Mozilla Developer Network, MDN, says that it's an app that's built using web platform technologies that provides a user experience that is like a platform-specific app. So a lot to unpack there. So web platform technologies, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but provides a user with an experience like a platform-specific app. When they say platform-specific app, they mean something native. So they mean iOS, Android, Mac OS, Windows, all that kind of fun stuff. So if you've ever used Slack or a variety of other things, they're Electron apps generally. So they're still web platform technologies, but they're bundled and packaged with something called Electron. VS Code, I think, is still an Electron app. But those things could also be PWAs in theory, because PWAs essentially are just packaged up installable websites or web applications. So that's kind of the big crux here. So platform specific versus, and I can't see my notes, so that's not helpful. Hold on 1 second. Pause. I just need to go to presenter mode. Bear with me. And I'm using a brand new browser because I like to make my life difficult. So I'm learning on the fly. All right, cool. All right, so that's there. Let's resume our share. All right, so platform specific apps, as I said, so you can see here the App Store icon for iOS and the Google Play icon for Android versus websites, right? So in Apple and Google, we both have software development kits, SDKs, which define how you build an application for those specific targets. Basically in iOS land, you're using Swift these days, and in Android land, you're using Kotlin. Again, a lot of the paradigms for any language will kind of be able to pick those things up as you learn those different ways of building these different things, but those are very specific to a platform, right? So if you build a Swift app, you can't deploy it to the Google Play Store. And if you build a Android app, you can't deploy it to the App Store or iOS, right? And so PWAs rely on these website technologies, your standard 3 HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And we'll see why PWAs kind of have a good benefit, embracing the web platform and things of that nature without getting platform specific. So just some benefits of platform specific things. They're easy for users to access because they can just go and download them. They can run offline. You can use them in the background. They can go fetch your mail or fetch notifications and things. They have a dedicated UI, so it doesn't look like a web browser. There's deep OS integration. So you have access to things that are native to the operating system that you wouldn't have on the web platform, and then the App Store whole thing, that whole shebang. So that's platform-specific apps in a nutshell. The benefits of websites obviously are that you can have a single code base, so you can deploy your app to many places via the web, right? So like everybody can use it. It's not platform specific. I can use it on my phone, I can use it on my tablet, I can use it on my TV, I can use it wherever I want, however I want, as long as there's access to the internet, that being the kind of downfall of it. So just to go here next, so what are the benefits of the PWA? So we still use our web platform text, so things we're natively familiar with. You still access them via the web by default, but like platform-specific applications, you can install them on devices. They can operate in the background and offline. They can integrate deeper into those devices, like access to just a few things here. I'll mention, like you can access the camera, you can access geolocation, you can access on Android, you can access contact information and things of that nature. So there's a lot of things that you can access that are more OS level things through them. But again, you're not building with those OS specific, platform specific languages or tools, right? And you can distribute them, believe it or not, via app stores and the web, right? So like you can actually package up a PWA and distribute it out to the App Store and to Google Play. And we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end. Again, PWAs can also not have the browser Chrome. So like because they're web applications, right? Like by default, like if you go to a website, you're gonna get your little Safari bar or your Chrome bar and all your buttons that the web browser has. But by shipping a PWA, your users can install those and then just natively use basically a full screen app of your website, web app. So that's the kind of benefit of this. In a number of ways, you can access notification systems and things like that too. So just to kind of give a quick background on it. So what do you need to make a PWA? You really only need two things besides your standard web technology stuff. You need something called the web app manifest, and you need a service worker. So the web app manifest is basically has to include very specific information. There's like certain required bits that you need, like a name and like an icon, so that somebody can install it on the phone and it'll show up and you can press it. But you can also define things like colors, how it should start. You can provide multiple icons for multiple types of devices and things like that. It's basically like a description of what your web app, progressive web application does. And then the service worker, for those of you who haven't heard that term before, is essentially a way of providing that offline experience. So service workers kind of give you the apps pages, the traditional part of a website, implement the user interface, and the service worker is the back end, which can support that offline and background operation stuff. So it's like basically a JavaScript file that you can instruct what to do and when. So you can think of when you're offline, maybe you have access to a cached state of a news feed, but when you go home and you connect to your Wi-Fi, then you pull the latest news, right? Or if you ever think about like Google Maps offline, right? You can have a Google Maps offline and use it. But then when you connect back online, let's say, they built a new road and you haven't connected in 3 years, you would see that new road, right? Like, so that's just kind of the idea there is basically like, it gives you this ability to do other things behind the scenes that you can't typically do with a website. Google's been very supportive of service workers and things like that. So there's a lot of talks from Google I/O and things like that about service workers. So just kind of going into this, when should you make a PWA? So here's my 4 reasons. There's, I'm sure, many more. One is you want your website to be installable on user devices. So a use case I can give is I work with an art museum, and they have art outside, and you could very easily see that you may want to have like the map and objects and other things as a installable thing, so that when you're on campus and you're not necessarily connected to the internet, you can still use the application. So there's one idea. There's plenty of others. When you want to work your website to work offline. So again, you know, if you're, I think a good example is like, let's say you're going out into the field to do work or something, and you need access to some resources, but you may not have an internet connection. You can still use the application and pull up those resources. And then if there was a new resource that came in while you were out and about, when you reconnect to the internet, it'll go, the service worker will go out and download that thing and cache it for you. If you want to leverage that platform specific functionality, like I talked about, you know, the camera, contacts, geolocation, things like that. Good reasons to use a PWA or set up a PWA. And then, you know, the, I think, primary benefit of using a PWA versus a platform specific application is you basically want to bundle up your web application and use that same code base that you've put your blood, sweat, and tears into and deploy it across multiple platforms, right? So just like the power of the web, when we had responsive web design, now we could ship our website to phones, and we had to do some more coding, but again, we're still using the same base. Here with a couple of extra files and some other information, we can ship and have an installable thing. So one example I'll give, you know, one example that we heard about during the intros was Uber. It can be installed as a progressive web app. Twitter, before it was X, used to be installable as a progressive web app. That's how I used it primarily. You know, there's a lot of things that can be installed as progressive web apps out there. Microsoft is pretty big champion of them. You can install them in like Windows from their store and things like that. And you'll see that Android/Google has more support for them for the platform specific functionality than Apple at the current moment. So I will just kind of raise that caveat that, you know, they're more secured in Android and Windows land than they are on, you know, Mac and iOS to some degree. So the next thing I wanted to show was just a demo. So I'm going to talk real quick about kind of some of the resources I used, and then I'll go into my demo. So some of the resources that kind of got me here, I'll go here first. So if we go up, so MDN, Mozilla Developer Network, great site for all web documentation kind of things and guides and stuff. Has a really good reader on this, giving you some more information about caching and all those other fun things you can do, displaying badges, stuff like that. So I'll kind of point this, I'll leave a link for this in the meetup afterwards. Web.dev, which is Google's alternative to this, also has good information about it. You know, you can go here and see different things about that kind of stuff. And so basically, you know, progressive web apps docs on MDN have some tutorials. And I basically was like, hey, I could just look at their tutorial and spin it up and show it to you all and be like, oh, look at this nice tutorial. Or I could make my own. So I could learn a little bit more in depth. And part of the reason, like I'll say, that this topic got sparked in my brain was because I did read this blog post from a company called Brainsome about how to transform your Drupal site into a mobile app. And they talked about PWAs and PWA Builder specifically for shipping apps to the App Store. So like they talked about this news portal they built, and they also talked about this epidemic control toolkit thing that they built. And again, like, just interesting, like sparked my mind because I've heard PWAs, I've played with PWAs, and I was like, oh, I could totally see a use case for this now in some of the work that I'm doing. Let me explore that some more and let me share it with all of you. So that's kind of where this came from. So kind of going through this app, we'll look at the one I made, which is more funny, I hope. And so the one I made, if I can go to the slide, is called Oh Expletive. So what I decided to do was make an app, and what you'll see here in VS Code is it's a simple PWA for keeping track of your bad language use to break the habit, right? So I, like probably a lot of people, say words I shouldn't say too often, and I wanted to say like, hey, if I'm cognizant of how bad I am, maybe I will break my habit of doing this. And so like, maybe I'll just install this on my phone and do it for myself and see how it goes. Not planning to ship this to the App Store. But let's just kind of dive in. So like first and foremost, HTML, CSS. So what do we have here? We have just a nice little index.html. They can be multi-page, they can be single web page applications. You can build this with a static site generator, you can use React, you can use Vue, whatever you like to build these things, to build PWAs. It's just really more about the like what else you ship along with it so that it's obvious how it works. And some of the directives you give in the manifest JSON and stuff like that. So here we are, good old HTML document, not too much going on here. You'll see we have a style sheet, right? This is a very basic style sheet, just kind of giving it some styles, some font sizing and typography. Didn't go crazy on it. It has this manifest JSON file that we'll get back to in a minute. It has an icon. This is very important because this is the thing that will show up on your phone when you install it. So you can see it and click on it and launch it in its PWA glory. Here we have a body, right? So like choose your words wisely. And basically it's a form. And what this form is doing is making me log when I say things. You can guess what I'm saying. Adding it, and then I get a history of it that'll tell me how often I've said something. In doing this, having repurposed this other app to some degree, I obviously want time in here and not just date. There's some other things I'll do to it before I play around with it more for my own personal use. But hey, it's something to do. I got to make it fun. So down here and then all the way at the end, we have this app.js inclusion, which is some JavaScript. So we have index.html, we have some CSS. Cool, right? Now here we have some JSON from some JavaScript where we're just defining the form, the fields, what happens when we submit. And here we have this thing called storage key, and then this function called store new word here, right? And so basically what this is doing is it's pushing what I put in the form into my local storage. So down here, window local storage. So the nice thing is I'm not pushing this to a database on somebody's server. The state is never getting out. They'll never know how bad I am. It'll all just stay local to my device. And so that's the nice thing about this too, is you can build these like really niche, user-centric, local applications for your own personal use or for other people, without having to touch their data and do other things. Again, you can build this out as you wish, but that's an idea here, is that you can store all this stuff and then retrieve it, right? So we're retrieving it using the storage key, parsing the JSON data, right? We're returning it, we're rendering it back, we're checking the date format. And we're basically rendering this back, and in our index.html file, we're basically updating this section with all the things that we put in from our local storage. That's all it's doing. Not too fancy.
John,
Yeah.
does local storage persist when you exit and restart the app or clear its cache?
If you clear its cache, it probably goes away. But I think it will persist because it's essentially like really what's going on behind the scenes is it's just your browser. So if you clear your browser cache, it'll probably destroy it. But yeah, I mean, if you're using private browsing mode, it will probably be gone the next time you go to it. But yeah, again, so like it only goes so far, and that's why we're storing this in the cache. So I think it will be terminated if it's really like hard reset. Thank you for that.
So on one more question.
Oh,
So
local storage should persist. Okay, go ahead.
yeah, so related to that, so imagine if I'm thinking of an app which is like a diary, like a personal diary
Mhm.
for everyone, and like since I need to store the data so that next time when I come up and open the app, I need to see what I logged last time. So is there any possibility to probably push it into a file and then store that file like a text document or something?
Yeah, so what Rich is saying is that local storage should persist and session storage wouldn't. I know Rich can't come off um, mic right now, but yeah, so he's saying basically it's writing it to a file that's persistent. But you could, of course, like pass this off to Firebase or some other thing where you store that data more permanently in another system too. That's just the way this example is working. And
Okay.
again, the thing here is if I'm not connected to the internet, it's here. And then when I do connect to the internet, something could happen, right? Where I like push that data back up. So like, but for a real app, you would want to store it in the base. Yeah, great point, Rich. So like, if you ever use Google Docs offline, you can like make edits to Google Docs offline. And then when you get back online, basically it pushes that up. So that's a very similar concept here, is that like you're doing some stuff locally and then it pushes it up in terms of like syncing back to their database. So locally it's stored, but then it pushes it back and syncs up with the third party with the third party database. So other couple things in here. So in our HTML file, we have this manifest.json file. And like I said, the manifest.json file is specific to progressive web apps. So it gives us a name, a description, where we're going to start inside the app, icons. So again, you can have multiple sized icons. Some things support SVGs, some things only want certain pixel sizes, things like that. You can define the theme color and the background color. So if I show you this, it's going to look like black on white on my browser. But if I was to install it locally on my phone, you would see that it would be a yellow background with black text. So slightly different. And then you have different display modes. So in display mode land here, I'm just going to pull them up from the thing. Manifest iconography. So your that's not what I want. We're standalone. All right, so controls it. So display basically controls the app's display mode. So full screen, standalone, minimal UI. So some UI, but not everything, just enough elements to move around. And then you can have like a regular browser view, right? Those are your 4 options there. You can define the orientation, portrait versus landscape, things like that. You can define your colors and things of that nature. So you can just kind of see like, again, it's just a JSON file, pretty simple, describes how you want your app to work or will look and start. And the other thing here is we also have a service worker. So basically here's the thing. So the service worker is what it makes the application work offline. So it has a version, list of resources for caching, things like that. And then you use, fetch, install, activate to kind of get those things. This part has eluded me right now in my little app that I'm working on here. So like, here's your offline resource list, right? Static resources. Just building up this file essentially. adding things to cache, removing things from cache, deleting old caches, all this fun stuff, right? And so at the end of the day, my file looks like, I've got my version, I've got my cache name, here's my resources, and on install, and activate, right, and on fetch. What it's going to do, it's going to return my cache or respond with a 404. Again, this is pretty much straight from this example just to see what it would do. And basically, like what I have, which is the piece that I'm trying to figure out why it's not working, which is this piece that I neglected to add to my HTML, is that, it's not here anymore. Where'd it go? Hold on a second. Just saw it. It also has to be served over HTTPS. So there's file and files. Files will mimic HTTPS supposedly. Right, so here's my app, right? It doesn't look like anything because it's not installed. It gives me a little date picker. I can pick a date. I can say which word I said, and I can add to my history. So you can see I said this, how many times did I say this today, right? Oh, I said it like 75 times. It's been a rough day. Time zone's off right now, so I got to work on that. But again, you can see like, hey, I look at this, now I have all these things. Maybe I could do something else with this data. How many times did I say this on this day? If I had timestamps, do I say these things more in the morning, more in the afternoon, more in the evening? I'll let you guess. But from my perspective, again, just trying to make it fun for myself, something I'm trying to work on personally, and do something funny with it. So Rich is saying, I'm assuming that Sean will talk about optimistic updates against cache. You have to write your app and assume that you have to rely on data already in the cache on the device because your user might not have a web connection. You then check in the background if there are any updates to replace the data to drop it into the app. Yep, great point. So like I said with that example in the in that blog post, right? So that's basically what this epidemic control kit is doing, right? So like as the people go off into the field, they download it while they have a good internet connection. And then when they get it, like they might be in the field and not have internet for days. Next time they get it, they might get some new information that downloads, right? So like it's pushing that data and checking the source for them. So again, that's pretty cool. And there's a really good, I can't remember, I'll find the link for it. Adactio, I don't know what the heck his name is, Jeremy, I think. He has a whole, like, basically book about progressive web applications. That's a progressive web application, which is fun. It's kind of meta. So anyways, so I'll link to that as well. The other thing I wanted to mention here is that this PWA Builder website, which is originally was Microsoft's like open source community project thing. So like you can enter a URL in here. So let's use mine because I pushed this to Netlify. So in theory, we can see if it thinks my app is up to snuff, which I'm pretty sure it's not. Right, so short name is required. It must be a string with a length of thing. Short name function similar to the name of the member, except that will only be used when there is not enough character space to display the application regular name. It is recommended that the short name be 12 characters or less in length. So it's telling me that basically my manifest JSON in a perfect world should have a short name, right? Short name, and we can just make it say like, oh, people are joining late tonight. Right, we can just make it that. Let me show you how to do that. Add a service worker to the base package. So my service worker is not actually there because I didn't tie it in right. Display override must not be an empty array. Similar to display member. Allows you to spec specific fallback order, different display modes. Okay, right. Value entered for side panel preferred width should be a number. Right, so it's giving me a whole bunch of things that I need to do in order to get this thing to be shippable. So I'll work on this and get it from 7 of 29 to hopefully 29 of 29. Service worker will be happy. Security, okay, security's happy, right? And so once I get this thing up to snuff, I could package it for the stores, right? And then it would package for all. So the 4 being Windows, Apple, Android, and Meta. And so like if I upload my thing to Netlify right now, and I just took the path of least resistance in Netlify, and I'm just uploading the folder because why make this more complicated for myself? I'm just going to upload the whole folder here, and we should see that at least one of those things goes away. And we go back to our PWA builder and refresh it. And look, our short name is gone. Fantastic. We've got 8 of 29, right? So basically, we just need to continue to edit our manifest. We need to make sure that the service worker is ready. Apparently, I can package it for the stores now. Good times. So I guess, you know, the closer you are to being 100%, the better, right? So like, if you run like a Lighthouse score against this site is also a PWA, I'm pretty sure. So let's see, can I get Lighthouse here? Lighthouse, analyze page load, right? Okay, so Lighthouse, which is Google's like analyzer tool, will actually check to see if your thing is a PWA, is one of the checkboxes for it. Thinking should come back as 100%. Think about it. So it is a PWA, it's happy, installable, right? Does not register a service worker that controls a page start URL, right? Manifest doesn't have a maskable icon. Okay, so there's some things that's like basically calling out, but you know, a whole bunch of things, right? Pretty cool. So you basically either you can make an application for a client, you can make an application for yourself, you can install on your own device. And basically all you did was make a website, right? So you don't have to ship it to these app stores, right? Like those app stores, it's a arduous process to get through the app store, right? You could just make a PWA that's just a website that's installable, and then people could just use it. So I think that's the real power of it. It's like not having to learn Swift. It's not learning to have Kotlin. It's not learning to have all these things and go through all these steps. You can just have a web application that you make with your standard technologies with some extra sauce on top, and deliver them and provide them more rich experience for you and your users to use this. I can see a whole bunch of places that I'm going to be using this in the next 2 to 5 years for sure. Some applications that I need to build that are more resilient, that work offline, being a big one. You know, that are installable when there's a Wi-Fi connection and things like that. So, you know, I think leaning into that platform is good. I'm big on open source, so like again, this is more open source than the proprietary systems and the proprietary gateways. You know, this would be you know, a way to do it, building it with the things that we know, right? Our standard technology stack. So I will stop there for questions, and then we can go to a discussion. So thoughts, what do you think? You know, have you ever installed one now that you know what they are? Like if you ever got one of those pop-ups that's like, sometimes you would get them those like install from the App Store, but you can also like just to add to home screen would be the thing you think about. Those would be like PWAs essentially, like, and you get a little icon on your phone and you can use it. And what you're really using is a website, but it's really just a fancy website that looks more native. Questions, thoughts? Should we switch over to discussion?
So, yeah, I'm a little curious You didn't really talk about access to native functionality, like let's say camera. Camera would be one like I might care about. And another question is, right, if I build this, can I quote unquote install it on my mobile device directly without going through the App Store?
Yes. So if you go to this website here, right, you have to ship it as a website essentially. So what can PWA do today? What PWA can do today is a PWA. You can install it. It goes over the different features, right? So media capture gives you, information about how you can get this information from user thing. Oh, okay, let it allow my camera. Okay, 15 permissions later, you might be able to see me. Let's see if it does it. Not happy. Try again. Did I click the wrong thing? Oh, it's streaming from my pocket. I apologize. So here's me from my pocket on my iPhone, streaming into this thing because of Apple. And I could record and I could do picture-in-picture and all that stuff. I could turn my camera off. I can power it off, right? So like, again, it's using web-specific ways of dealing with these things so you have access to them. Geolocation. So ask me, oh gosh, so many reasons. Let's reload that. Okay, I know that allowed. Device doesn't have permission to access GPS information. Okay, so it's gonna yell at me. If I was on my phone, I would be happier. Rich says, the thing that cuts the mustard is that while the newest of the newest browser APIs do give us theoretical access, things like GPS and camera or device orientation, for something that relied on device API, they'd be inclined to use something more native like React Native instead. Thanks for the love for the various instruments hiding in my background. Again, it's really a question of like, do you want the walled garden, right? Or do you want the open web, right? And the open web, as more APIs become possible, because that's just kind of how it's going, right? The web should be more capable or as capable as native operating systems and their APIs, right? Like content picker is a thing that's coming out that's not totally out yet. Notifications, right? You can subscribe to notifications, all that kind of stuff. It gives you nice code examples, what that looks like. Again, it's just service worker doing that. Certain devices can't do things, right? And this feature is not supported on your device. So it's kind of nice. This website specifically gives you device text. So if you had an Android device, maybe it would say, yes, you can. And if you had an iOS device, it would say, no, you can't. And on my Mac device, it doesn't like it. The web share thing, again, not here, but iOS, I think, supports it. A whole bunch of things, AR, VR stuff. This works on my phone, but not on my computer. Authentication would work. Right, it gives you like code examples and stuff. So this website's pretty helpful in terms of what it can do, accessing the file system, doing audio recordings, payment stuff, all that kind of fun things. Orientation, I think, is not supported on iOS, but is supported on Android, I want to say. Gives you links to the can I use, device orientation, issues. For iOS doesn't implement that correctly. Thank you. But like through Chrome, it's got partial support, right? So like these things will inch closer, right, over time, right? But like you can foresee like reasons why something like this would be helpful, especially in places that don't have great internet connection, where you might have it like at a cafe, but you might not have it at home, right? Like interesting things.
So
Go ahead.
I did have a question. With regards to, because the Apple Developer Program for like actually getting like apps out there, you typically have to enroll and do all of that. But from what I could clearly see, like you're almost bypassing it completely. in
You're-
regards to like, so yeah, I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand that. How does that work?
So if you want to ship this to the App Store or the Play Store, you
Right.
still gotta go through their crap. But you don't
Okay.
necessarily have to build a Swift application to do it.
Okay.
That's the difference. The difference is you're dealing with the administrative nuance of dealing with those platforms. It's basically that PWA builder website will give you a package that can ship to the App Store. So like they're both basically web UIs, right?
Okay.
Wrapping your application.
Mhm.
And so that's what it's doing, right? And then like obviously like if you forgot to include the right icon size and you don't have a copyright statement or whatever the heck, you know, the different things are going to require of you, then you know you're going to have to go through this hoop still. But you know, you could get out as a web app, see if people like it, see if people use it, then go that next extra hurdle. But again, you know, at some point, you know, if you're building a business around it, is a PWA enough? I guess is probably the big question. Because a lot of the companies, like Twitter as an example, or maybe Uber as an example, would be, it was like they made the native thing, then they made this other one. And the reason they made the other one was pretty much for that use case of places where internet is spotty, where, you know, you need, you know, you don't have as much bandwidth and resources like you do in the US, right? So that's probably part of the reason. Or like, you know, I'm traveling overseas and I don't have, you know, the same level of, you know, unlimited data plan that I have in the US, right? Like you can see why the PWA version has some benefit in those use cases. And again,
So as like a foundation, you could start out as you could start out as either, but it depends on the use case and also how big the business you're thinking the business might become, or the idea or the service might become.
right. And so one thing I know is if you go to a museum and the museum asks you to install an app from the App Store, nobody installs the app. Like 99% of the people don't install that. If I go to a website and the website says, save this to your home screen for easier access.
Right. Okay.
I'm
see.
more inclined to keep it for my visit and destroy it because I'm not going through that. I'm not going, okay, I want to download it from the App Store. I'm getting the thing. Like it's a much faster, simpler approach to getting a thing. Like that's in my brain how I'm thinking of using it in the short term, right? Is that I basically can turn a Drupal site into a PWA or a WordPress site into a PWA, and then, you know, basically allow users to install it when I know, hey, you're inside this like concrete building, you're not going to have Wi-Fi, but at the desk, you'll have Wi-Fi and you can install the application.
So
Right.
can you talk more about that, Sean? Because like they're not installing the Drupal site here, they're installing some kind of JavaScript front end to the Drupal site.
Yeah, so what you can see, like this blog post is pretty good about explaining what the Drupal bit of it is. If I can find where's the limitations, no takeaways. So there's a module for it. That's with all things Drupal. So there's a progressive web app module. Again, your mileage may vary. There's a 7 and 8 version, well, 7 and 8 plus versions. Right, that will kind of give you like what's going on under the hood to give you to basically make your Drupal site a PWA, right? So you could ship it as a PWA, and that's essentially what that Brainsome company is saying they're in this blog post that I saw on Drupal Planet was doing, right? They're basically taking their Drupal website and turning it into a PWA and shipping it out in one case or another. Again, it's really around having those extra files and being an installable thing, right? And then the thing with the service worker is that you then would stream in, like, as you have new content, you would stream in your new content when the person gets an internet connection, if they have no internet connection. But the installability piece, which is the manifest JSON file, and then the service worker piece, which is the working offline cacheability piece.
So a question about that, do you actually have to install it to the home page or install it on your device to get the offline capabilities?
Here, let's.
Or does the service worker bit of it give you that regardless?
Does it install it, you mean?
No, well, I'm trying to understand. So, like, do you actually have to install it on the device to get the offline capabilities? Like, I guess the service worker, if you just open the web page in your browser and then you lose internet connection, do you get the same benefits?
You just don't get the real-time content, right? Like you get like basically a snapshot of the application.
Sure.
So here, I'm gonna show you what this thing looks like here. Let's turn my camera on and do it live. All right, so here. What the heck is that Apple thing here? Let's not blur my background so you can actually, so here's that what can PWA do thing today. I have Safari, and then if I go to my share icon and I scroll past all the people, I have this add to home screen thing. Can you see that? Cool. It says PWA today. I can rename it to whatever I want. And now I have a PWA today icon on my phone. And what I get is the application without any of the browser Chrome.
Right.
Right. And I can get my info and do whatever the navigation bits are here. And then I
Yeah,
can
I mean that
show you
that
all a
part
picture
I-
of your stuff.
Right. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is if you're in the web browser, does the service worker operate to give you that caching also?
Oh, if you don't install it, I don't think so. Which says you have to write the offline capabilities, then you get them. So I don't think you get. I think the service worker is really working when you install it, and not just hiding under the hood, right? Because like, let's say you just went to a website and it happened to be a PWA and you check all the boxes, and then you don't have an internet connection. Like, I don't think it's really doing anything different than like a regular website at that point, if that makes sense, right? Is that what you're getting at?
Maybe, yeah. That's what I'm trying to figure out, right?
Like, what's the benefit of the service worker?
Or what? Yeah. Well, or what? Or is the install to home screen step necessary to get the benefits of this of it being a PWA? And there was another question about creating code you want to protect. Yeah, I think that. Well, it sounds like there's two pieces, right? So part of this is it sounds like for like this Drupal module, for example, it's the code of the Drupal site is not exposed, just the content that was already publicly accessible. And so there could be lots of code behind that. And the PWA is basically just caching the content.
Yeah.
Right. And so like Rich is saying, not installing, you've written a web page or web app.
And then if you're offline, you're offline. If you're online, you're online. Yeah.
Right. And I guess, that's.
So the difference is that if you install it, then let's say breaking news on the homepage, right? You were offline. When you reconnect to the internet, you get the breaking news comes in, the service worker goes out and swaps it. So if you open the app after you reconnect to the internet, you get the latest news, right? As a contrived example.
So it's almost like a glorified bookmark, essentially. It's like you basically have like the bookmark on your phone and or whatever device you're using, and then it just has the extra functionality of being a native-ish app on your phone or device, and then you okay, this is making sense.
And Rich says all caps yes. So yeah, I mean that's the benefit of it. The benefit of it is that you're not having to build like 3 different things, right? Like that's really where it starts to come into play. At some point, you're getting venture funding for billions of dollars. Like you'll go out and build a native app because you can hire the team. But if you're a solo developer, you can't do that, right? Like there's only so much time in the day. You can't, you can't build for, I mean, you could build for all the platforms. You could use React Native and deploy to multiple targets, but just thinking like, hey, how do I get this thing into people's hands where they can use it in an offline mode? That's the key thing. Like, they can still use it. They don't get a 404 page. They don't get error messages that they're offline. They get an application, right? That's the real benefit of it. Like, you could think like doctors in a hospital, they have some PWA that tells them, something, right? Like, it's like a dosage calculator or something, right? They could use that without having to ever connect to the Wi-Fi once they install it. And as long as that application really never changes, it'll just continue to work. And if it does change, next time they connect to the internet, they'll get a new version of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, but from the page you're showing there, it kind of seems like if you have a service worker defined and you're in the browser, you would get that behavior also. Like, there's nothing in here that says you have to be wrapped.
Service workers and a service worker is a requirement of a PWA, but a service worker does not make it a PWA.
Right.
Right. And so, the PWA piece is the manifest JSON plus the service worker, but the service worker in a PWA can literally be expletive. It doesn't have to do anything, right? It could just be a pretty bitch bare bones file that doesn't do anything because everything else is done it in the app, right? It's just that it has to be there to make it a PWA.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I'm curious here, right? Is this a way you could essentially, it almost sounds like it's a way you could make all your web applications resistant to like network interruptions.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm not sure how complicated it is.
Right. Yeah.
So, right. So
Right.
service workers, right? Just
JavaScript.
JavaScript thread, just separate JavaScript process basically. And from what you're showing there, Sean, it says it basically acts as a proxy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it sounds like you could do a lot of fun things with them, maybe, but yeah, I don't figure them on a normal web page.
Well, like, think of like, let's go with another real world example. If you're going out and like doing like what do you call, what's the abbreviation for the get out the vote? GTAV?
GOTV.
GOTV. I can't spell. But like, think you could have like everybody who's going out and doing this could like log if they talk to the person or not. And then when they reconnect to the internet, it could push it up into like a centralized database. Like,
yeah,
so
there is like a web app called Minivan that kind of does that, but I don't know how it's built. It's a little but
like, it's pretty quick that you can say, oh, I can see how this totally could be useful when internet's not reliable.
Right.
Or I'm on a plane and I don't want to pay $9.95 an hour, but I still want to, do X, right? I still want to read Reddit, although Reddit won't let you do that anymore. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like, there's a lot of good examples. In my brain when I read this article, basically was like, oh, client X, I totally have like 5 use cases for it. Like today, I could start hitting the ground running. Or these have to be built for the future, knowing that this thing should be a target. All these things should be built as progressive web apps, so that when Wi-Fi is unreliable, and then Wi-Fi is available, they can sync up, right? So like, if the data about something changes, generally it only changes in this case once a day anyway. But if like once a week the data changed because somebody went around with a hotspot that it connected to, it'd be happy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions on this, or shall we switch? Wow, that filled up a lot more time than I thought it would. Or should we switch to the other discussion topics. All right, +1 for other discussion topics. So again, if you want to share something or ask something, chat it, ask it. Stephen had 2 things: documentation on what www data is in Linux.
Yeah, the group.
Yeah.
And I just can't find a good explanation. It just tells me that files in your Drupal directory should be the group membership. It should be www data. But
Mhm.
why? Why? I mean,
Well-
if I make it the user, it works. If I make it www data, it works. But every time I look for an explanation of why it should be, or what's the benefit, advantage, or rationale, I can't find anything that makes any sense.
I mean, I can take a little shot at it, or unless you want to, Sean, or someone else.
Go
I'm
for
listening.
I mean, so, I mean, it's part of it is just convention, right, Steve? So it's like by convention, the web server is installed under and is run as the non-root user named www-data.
Okay.
So like, typically you might run, Apache web server that way, or we run Nginx that way, because that's how it comes in the package, right? So like the Ubuntu package for Nginx, make sure that that user account exists, and then it sets up the init file for Nginx such that it, basically runs as that user.
Well,
right?
so sorry to just interrupt, but it's not the user www data, it's the group is what the question is.
Okay,
So-
well, so typically every user, when you create a user account, typically you create a group with the same name.
I see. All right.
And
Okay.
a group basically just lets you share access controls in kind of a very basic way among multiple users. So I don't know what are what instructions you were seeing, but for example, it might be that like if there's some assets on the file system that the web server needs to read, but maybe not write, you could have those directories and files be in group www data, and the group could have read access to them, right? And some
Sure.
other user could own them.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, that does. I guess I was forgetting about the user and the group name being the same. That maybe
Yeah.
is what, that may be it.
It doesn't have to be the same, right? But that's just kind of, again, the default is when you create a user, you create a group with the same
Right.
name. And,
Right.
yeah, so I think that's where it's coming from, but yeah, depending on, I mean, the other reason, right, to kind of have this set up is when if you deploy your code securely, like on your own server, that the code base should be owned by some non-root user, like, we created an account named Drupal.
Yeah, of
And
course. Yep.
so right, but the public files where you do uploads have to be potentially owned by www data, because that's where PHP and the web server need to write things.
Okay. All right, so maybe I was just overthinking it, or just misread something. It didn't. I think the correlation between the username and group name was probably what the mix-up was in my mind. That
Yeah.
it didn't. I was thinking that it was the group name was something special, because if I like admin one for so arbitrary is the owner of the website, but admin one can be the user and the group, and
Right.
it still works.
Yeah, so, but again,
Okay.
right, you can assign different group level permissions or
Got
access control versus user level access controls.
All right. I'll take that. Then the last question, the other
And
question.
usually the user is automatically in the group that has the same name, so that may also be part of
Right. Well, that's what I think the confusion was more than anything.
Right.
I wasn't thinking that way. Not being as experienced as some of you guys are. So the other question I had was about using Drush for assigning security on the file system within the Drupal site.
Using Drush to like change file permissions.
Yeah, well, in other words, for apparently I don't have it in front of me, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was reading that apparently you can go through and assign permissions in the appropriate places. One of the, maybe it's one of the add-ins to Drush. Drush 10 I've been working with, and it apparently can detect or assign the proper permissions for security.
I mean, this may kind of relate to what I was saying before, right? Which is, ideally you want all the site code owned by a user that is different than the user running the web server in PHP. And so, maybe, I mean, for Drush to do what you said, you probably would have to run it as a, under root essentially, right? Because it would.
No, you can't. Well, you really, I don't think you can run. Can you run Drush under root? I thought you have to run it under the user.
No, you can. Well, you can. If you're.
Well, Composer won't let you run it. Well, barks at you if you try to do it under root.
Right. No, you can definitely do it with Drush, and you can definitely make a mess of things, because I've done that. Like you like do a Drush, even cache clear or something, or generate some JavaScript files, and now they're actually owned by root instead of the right user, and your website can't remove them anymore.
I know, I've done it.
Right. So you definitely run Drush as root and it won't complain. Not necessarily a good idea, but
Right.
but it may, the bigger thing may just be like removing group, like write or world write access to files, for example. So even if you just ran it as that deployment user, it could check all the code and make sure that the code was not group or world writable, and that would be a pretty minimal thing.
Right, and I just don't have that in front of me, what I was referring to, but like I said, I did read something just again, newer to Drush included, and that just popped up, and I was puzzled. Well, it seemed nice to have that it was there, but I was not familiar with it.
Yeah.
Okay. We're good.
Okay.
Great.
Well,
Any other things people want to talk about, discuss?
Thought you had other things on your list, Sean.
I have WordPress 6.3 on my list as a thing to discuss. Let me check and share. Let me do that while I wait for see if anybody's got anything else to bring in here. So WordPress, probably the most popular content management system on the internet. Powers a heck of a lot of things. The White House website is now WordPress. And CNN and all these other things are WordPress. Lots of WordPress out there. This is 6.3. It's the new version of WordPress, just came out. It kind of continues down the path of the WordPress 6 lifecycle, which is kind of bringing more things into the editor. And so like, now you can do everything in the site editor. So site editor was basically, prior to this, just really kind of gave you templates and patterns, but now you can do navigation style pages. It's just, again, kind of like the Gutenberg slash, which is a different editing interface for WordPress, kind of just taking over WordPress to make it more modern. So like now you can deal with things that you previously would have to do in kind of the old way, in this newer way. So like more things are capable in there. You can preview themes on blocks. Blocks are essentially like global components in WordPress. You can create and sync patterns. So like if you had a brand site and you wanted to make sure all the brand things are all the same across all the things, sync those puppies up. They added a command palette because God knows everybody wants command palette. Drupal has a module for this called Coffee that does this exact thing, but you see it in a lot of apps. GitHub has it. I think Netlify has it. Everybody's got like Command K, Control K, something like that. The standard command palette thing, where you can basically like start typing in something without having to go around and navigating a menu. So that's cool. You know, you have some more design controls in terms of things not having to do code on per se. This is pretty interesting, like an audit trail on the style changes. So like, you know, normally there's like a revision history on content changes, but now you have a revision history on like say that person changed the yellow to grow like green. Now you know who did that and when, and then you could reprimand them for doing that. There's this like footnotes annotation thing, which I thought was pretty interesting. Details block, not too crazy there. And then, you know, standard, any new release of anything should get more performant and more accessible. So there's a bunch of performance and accessibility improvements. Now you can use aspect ratio on images, you know, all this kind of fun stuff. So, you know, WordPress just continuing to eat the world as it does. And like I said, the WordPress conference is at the end of August in DC. There'll be some live stream stuff there. The fun part here, for those of you in PHP spaces, they stopped continuing PHP 5, which is long since been dead. And now the minimum PHP supported version is 7.0.0, which is long since been dead. So WordPress is notoriously backwards compatible at the expense of security, potentially, in this case. But modern WordPress can run on modern PHP, so that's not really an issue. WordPress core runs on PHP 8.1. So on the latest and greatest PHP versions, it's just that you could have really crappy hosting that, for whatever reason, didn't upgrade you, and your WordPress application would still work.
So, yeah, well, why would they pick 7.0.0 at this point?
Well, you know, backwards compatibility, Peter, because they don't care about security.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, when was Series 7.0.0? I mean,
It's been ended like several years, right?
yeah. I mean, like 7.4 just ended last year, right? So yeah, 7.0 probably ended like 3 years ago or more. But anyways, hey, it will run. You know, I don't know. I don't get it personally, but the way it is. So yeah, so interesting new WordPress versions. This is a more sizable one. Some of the other ones have been smaller in the past, but again, like, you know, the site editor thing kind of eating all the things is the way they're going. And again, you know, the rationale here is, you know, making it easier for people. WordPress has always been more of a end user focused CMS, I would say, than other things. Maybe not always, but more so in the recent past. You know, versus something like Drupal that's maybe more developer focused. Although Drupal's starting to get more and more editor focused, I would say. We don't call them site editors, we call them site builders. Yeah, there's that whole thing too, because a lot of these things I would say are site builder tasks in Drupal land, versus editor tasks, which would be more content things. But I digress. So interesting, check it out. Other things people want to talk about, ask about?
I'm looking at Mozilla Docs. It really looks like you can put a service worker on any website.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to be in the context of PWA. It's
Right.
just maybe the biggest use case.
Yeah, it's a requirement of a PKPUA, but it's not a requirement of a website in general.
To continue on Drush real quick, there apparently is a Drush fix permissions command. Sets permissions, ownerships, and groups for backdrop files and directories. Drupal fix permissions repository provides a bash script to automatically set up correct file permissions on Drupal installations.
Well, so it sounds like it's just a bash script.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it just was called from Drush, so that's why I was asking.
I mean,
I know Drush can call other scripts and things, and that's apparently one of them. But I didn't see it directly in the. I bumped into it someplace, and just trying to learn, not.
yeah.
Sometimes you read a lot of things, and then you forget where you try to stitch it all together.
For sure. Any other fun things, Peter? You and I need to finish getting the Drupal Camp New Jersey website up to Drupal 10 before November.
Yeah, along with all the websites at work.
Yeah, that too.
I think the Drupal Camp New Jersey one will be the easier task, but might
we
be
hope
good.
so. And for anybody interested, we are always looking for people to help and volunteer. This will be my Drupal Camp New Jersey plug. So Drupal Camp New Jersey is a web with a Drupal focus conference camp held in Princeton, New Jersey. Usually a day or two. It's in the middle of March 14th through 16th. We're very much at the beginning stages of planning and implementation. And getting all that stuff going. So if you're ever interested in helping organize an event, please get in touch. Team at Drupal Camp New Jersey at drupalcampnj.org. Definitely need some new hands.
Yeah, and also we'll be looking for people to speak and things like that. So
yep, it's a good time. And lots of learning and all that fun stuff.
This will be what, the 11th, almost annual?
12th.
12th? Okay. We can try to count.
Yeah, I think you missed the 10th. I think you missed the 10th because we had to skip a year, right? We skipped 1 year only. Maybe we only skipped 1 year.
Pandemic, yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I think we only skipped one, unlike some other camps.
I think
But
just
yes.
we got the timing. I think we had it in January and then pandemic.
Right, we had it right before the world shut down, and then yeah, fun times. And then yeah, I mean, a lot of the camps we mentioned, some of the other ones, the Drupal GovCon and NedCamp, some of those haven't been around in years, right? Like GovCon hasn't happened in like 3 years, I want to say. And I think NedCamp, their first year back was last year. But yeah, it's a different space, but definitely try to continue to support local communities and volunteer-led events because a lot of people put a lot of hard work into these things, and they obviously want to have reach and they want to have impact in terms of like helping people. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. Whether it's helping them learn about stuff, whether it's helping them start speaking, whether it's them, organizing events, whatever it might be, there's a lot of opportunities in that space. So be on the lookout for some emails and some meetup messages about opportunities and stuff there. And we usually just meet over Slack and things like that. So It's pretty non-committal, or I shouldn't say it's not non-committal. I should say it's flexible in terms of like you know, how much you want to dip your toe in or not into those things.
Yeah, it's always fun.
Yes. If there's no other questions or comments or anything, maybe we'll end early, a few minutes early. Thanks everybody for coming out. We'll post the video. I'll post a whole bunch of links to Meetup. If not today, tomorrow. You know, be on the lookout for our next meetup in September the 14th, I want to say. Yep, 14th of September. And if there's any topics or specific things you want to hear about, you know, we're happy to find presenters. So do let us know.
Hi, Roger here. I have a question.
Sure.
Okay. So today's topic, progressive web apps. So, you said the next meeting is on like September 14th.
Yep.
So like, you know, we'll like continue the same topic, like on that day.
Nope. It's a new topic or topics every month. I mean, sometimes we'll circle back around to something, but we try to bounce around a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I had to like, you know, I had to like leave for like a part of the session, and I just like, you know, came back.
Oh, good.
Okay,
We'll post the
so-
video up to our YouTube account, which is youtube.com/DrupalCampNJ is where they get posted.
Okay. But like this group, you know, they only meet like once a month.
Yeah, we only meet virtually once a month on the second
Oh.
Thursday of the month.
We do,
Okay.
you know, use a Drupal Slack, and there's a New Jersey channel in the Drupal Slack, Drupal community Slack. So you are welcome to join that and ask questions or make comments.
Actually, yeah, I have Slack, so like, you know, I can like join the Slack group.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Can you like post a link in the chat or like?
Join Slack. I just gotta make it. Come on. Yeah, I'll post a link in the
It's just that, right?
chat to this
Okay,
because
all right.
I'll give you the link to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, anyways, you know, yeah, I feel like, you know, like I learned a lot today, and I definitely want to like, you know, check out like, you know, more like tutorials and like, you know, videos on this topic, and yeah, I just want to like, you know, like learn more.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, yeah, thanks for sharing the Slack, and yeah, have a nice day.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank
Thanks
you,
again,
Peter.
Rich.
Thank you, Sean. That's great,
Thank
good
you.
answers.
Good to see
Thank
you all.
you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Have a good night.
Very nice.
Have a good night. Thanks.